So how does it feel to tango with a stranger with limited practice, and then you're being left alone? It's hard, and it's risky, and I can tell you that my feet are sore now. To apply that metaphor to a higher education context, how does it feel to work in an intense and intellectually challenging workplace with limited interaction with the organization and your coworkers? My name is Tatum Adiningrum. I'm from Faculty of Education and Social Work, and my research is about part-time academics, academic identity. Part-time academics are increasingly becoming an important part of the university experience. Much more in some countries, but they are generally on the increase as higher education institutions need to make up for shortfalls in government funding. For example, just over 50% of lecturers in non-profit higher education institutions in the US are employed part-time, while just over 50% of academic staff in Australia are employed on a continuing basis. The international literature consistently voices concern about their impact on undergraduate education. But it contains contradictions. On one hand, there's a big debate whether they are effective teachers, and they're also being looked at more lenient in gradings. They're not as qualified to be full-time. They don't do research, so their teaching is not as informed. They're not available to students, and they don't care about their institutions. On the other hand, the recruitment of part-time academics continues, and they are not paid extra to do extra jobs like gradings, research, or pastoral care. And there's a limited engagement for them into the campus life. So I found this ironic. I am looking at the identity and teaching practice of part-time academics in Indonesia, my country. In Indonesia, the role of the government in institutional management and employment is significant. For example, all higher education institutions have to be accredited by a national accreditation body, and the promotion of lecturer has to be approved by the government. This has an impact on part-time academics employment because the government has set rules in place about it. For example, in the past, part-time academics were allowed to have formal academic positions, and they were counted in the staff-student ratio for accreditation purposes. Then in around early 2000-ish, they changed the rules so that only those employed in the university for 40 hours were allowed to have academic careers from junior lecturer to professors and be counted in the ratio. Just this year, they changed the rules again so that institutions could employ part-time academics formally. This latest change will potentially increase the number of part-time academic employment. I did a pilot to explore my research questions. What is the nature of the identity of part-time academics? Given their multiple identities and roles, how do they identify with their role as faculty members? I did semi-structured interviews with 4 Indonesian academics who are currently postgraduate students in Auckland. 2 of them are part-time academics, and two are full-time. And my temporary findings show that they identify with multiple roles, these 2 groups. Although the part-timers, they identify with more diverse roles. But what I found really interesting is that although both groups were passionate about giving the best to the students, they don't seem to work together. One group will see the other as, like in the social identity theory, it can be explained as one group will see the other as inferior to strengthen their group identity. In this study, I found that the two groups look at each other as others, and they focus on their own role. Statements from the part-timer also suggest that this disengagement is supported by the institutions, perhaps unintentionally. So I quoted, "They, full-timers, only engage me in informal conversations, never substantial things or decision-makings. I rarely did social interactions with other colleagues in the university because this institution is very transactional. It is not possible to interact socially in that lecture room, perhaps because the institution does not design it to happen." It should be noted, though, although the part-timers show little social commitment or organizational bond, they indicated a strong affective commitment to teaching. One respondent said, "I will keep on teaching, but where I teach, that's another matter." Another said, "If I stop teaching, I will lose the feeling of being a lecturer, and this role makes my life more colorful. I got my teaching satisfaction from this profession." I would argue that there must be a more effective way to tap into the richness of experience and the commitment to teaching shown by the part-time academics. How? My studies will give better and more complete picture of the problem and possible solution. In the first study, I will look into the identity and roles of part-time and full-time academics by doing interviews and teaching observations. In the second study, I will explore similarities and differences in their teaching practices by conducting a survey to academics, survey to students, combined with interviews and teaching observations. The result of these two studies will be used to propose a more effective professional development opportunities for part-time academics, which will hopefully be able to engage them more fully in their teaching and in the institution. Because we would like to see the tango continue as a couple and not transforming into individual dance. After all, it takes two to tango. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We welcome questions for Tatum.
This tango to happen? Isn't it?
Sorry?
Could it be possible that it's a deliberate thing?
Deliberately.
Yeah, deliberate, that an institution would want the tango not to happen, so to speak, or dance.
I haven't found that this is intentionally arranged.
Thinking of how big institutions behave, and I'll lump the University of Auckland into this. Oh God, this is recorded, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
It is. So you haven't come across it. You haven't seen evidence of this.
Like in the literature, and also, like this problem is complex. When in one side, the university would like to keep the cost reduced. They don't want to spend more. But on the other side, they want the experience of students to be good. So they provide basic things like induction, basic trainings, but it's not pushed enough. So there is a contradiction. If you say that this is intentionally arranged, I think it is not intentionally, but they have in the back of their mind how to keep the cost reduced.
Very good answer.
Very politic answer. Full disclosure, I have been a part-time academic both here at the University of Auckland and in North America, so I have lots of opinions about this. You mentioned research. In this idea of people working together, most part-time academics are doing research, but without research credits and without being paid for that research. So it does directly affect the teaching. And so how do you think do you think universities are benefiting from research active staff members who they don't actually have to acknowledge as research active? As it's a really hard question of how do we, students are benefiting from it and the universities are benefiting from it, but the part-time staff themselves are not because their research is not acknowledged. And how does your research deal with that thorny issue?
Ooh, this is a social identity theory again. I think that is very contextual, like in North America and perhaps in New Zealand as well. I know the literature said that they are as qualified now, they have PhD and stuff. That is not the case in our country. In our country, if you want to benefit from your research, you have to be inside the system, which is only designed for full-time faculty. That you have to fulfill a number of credits for 4 areas. So for teaching, research, communities, work, and other, like serving in committees and stuff. While in our country, part-time faculty is being used mainly for their experience, because of their experience in practical world, and not so much for the research. But it is contradictory, because now the university is changing. Not only that the university wants to prepare someone to be academics, but it's just changed into an institution that prepare for workforce. So if your question is about, is the university benefiting from research-informed teaching, we need to look at that case again in the more recent years, because the world has changed.
Thank you very much, Tatum.
Thank you.